All right, what's going on, guys? It's Apoqsi, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be running through the 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗥 patch 11 notes for July 16th, 2019. So we're going to be running through this as fast as possible. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Patch 11 is here and brings with it a sizable list of adjustments and fixes to Adventure Mode and Nuclear Winter, which honestly is actually very good. Grab the punch bowl, it's back, and settle into the full list of patch notes for today's update. So the download sizes for this update will be approximately 5.5 gigabytes for consoles and 2.5 gigabytes for PC. This is patch version 1.2.1.18 for all platforms, so PC, PS4, and Xbox One. Now, one of the primary things in this update is the power armor improvements. This is something that they've actually been talking about for a while, but let's go ahead and read what they have to say about it. We've reworked the underlying systems behind power armor to address a ton of power armor related bugs, improve performance, and help the entire system function more smoothly overall. While most of these are under the hood improvements, we believe these changes will help you have better experiences and encounter fewer issues while wearing your favorite sets of power armor. As this brings a significant update to our power armor systems, some players may notice the following one-time side effects upon logging in and after downloading today's patch. First of which could be that your power armor pieces may be unequipped from power armor chassis you own and moved from your stash to your inventory or vice versa. So things might get moved around from your stash to your inventory or your inventory to your stash, and the pieces might be unequipped from the chassis that they were on. So just keep that in mind. However, they do have things to go along with this. So you will need to re-equip those pieces after logging in, of course. Some players may also receive an extra power armor chassis or extra power armor pieces in their inventory or stash that weren't present prior to patch 11. These are actually items that didn't save correctly when you originally collected them, and the power armor improvements mentioned above restored them. So if you're wondering, what if this gets me over encumbered, or what if I don't want the stuff from my stash in my inventory, or what if I need the stuff from my stash in my inventory? Well, if you had one or more power armor chassis in your stash before installing patch 11, your character may have been moved to a train station in the world. This was done in order to help players who became over-encumbered due to power armor pieces and chassis moving into their inventory. So now they can transfer those items back into their stash without needing to walk home from their current location in the world. That would be kind of a pain in the ass, so thankfully, Bethesda thought of that one. Now moving on to art and graphics. Power Armor actually has a new animation that plays upon entering Power Armor from a Power Armor station. Hopefully this fixes the issues of it glitching the camera through the wall, because usually Power Armor stations are right next to walls. So I will actually be doing some tests in game and taking a look at this stuff in a later video, probably tomorrow, so keep a lookout for that one. Moving on to the Atomic Shop, the featured screen has received a little bit of a facelift. Many more items and offers will now appear at once, making it easier to see the current sets of featured items at a glance. For basic repair kits, when purchasing basic repair kits, players can now select which character they'd like to receive them. So this is actually really good news. I don't like repair kits. I think they're kind of edging into pay to win. But when they're making changes like this for something that's not going to get removed from the game, that's always a plus. But again, not a fan of repair kits. Moving on to camp crafting and workshops, the scrap all junk option no longer automatically scraps bulk junk at workbenches. Thank you. Thank you. I don't understand why this was a thing. The amount of times I've wasted materials creating bulk items and then just doing the auto scrap, which I always do, and then it just scraps the bulk into the default form. Was so infuriating, and thankfully Bethesda's now fixed this. So bulk junk will continue to be automatically scrapped for necessary components while crafting or repairing, which that makes sense. It would be kind of annoying if you had to break down it manually if you wanted to use it. So thankfully that's a thing. Now we have the punch bowl. Party on! Players can once again add alcohol to or drink alcohol from punch bowls. For the 44 pistol, nuclear material has been replaced by gears in the crafting requirements for all 44 pistol mods except the prime receiver. For the ski sword, the crafting requirements for the skate mod have been reduced and the makeshift warrior perk requirements has been removed. Now moving on to design and gameplay. Legendary items dropped as loot by a legendary enemy will now appear much quicker on that enemy's corpse. Loading of loot has always been kind of a problem in Fallout 76, so hopefully this update will bring improvements to that overall. Deathclaws now have a chance to drop Deathclaw hides on death. Acid can now be dropped as loot when killing cave crickets. Dying in an interior location, such as the burrows, now automatically respawns players near where they entered that location in most cases. That actually, I guess, kind of makes more sense. For spoilage, all raw food items and fluxes now last 50% longer before spoiling. Thank you. I feel like they nerfed this stuff beforehand, and now they're kind of bringing it back closer to where it was. Fast traveling no longer causes food and drinks to take condition loss. Again, amazing news. This was a part of the problem. Stealth boys can now be used while wearing power armor. That's awesome to hear. That should be pretty badass. Don't know why this wasn't a thing before, but I'm excited for it. Moving on to user interface, a slight blurring effect now appears on screen when taking damage to better indicate that the character is experiencing pain. For item descriptions, additional information is now displayed in the menus for legendary items, mods, and recipes. So when selecting a legendary item in trade, vending, or container menus, all of its legendary attributes now appear instead of just the first. That is fantastic news. When inspecting a recipe or mod, the description for the resulting item now appears under the item's name. And when selecting a recipe or mod in trade, vending, or container menus, the description for the resulting item now appears above the item stats. All of that is fantastic news. Players can now rotate the game camera while playing musical instruments. I really hate locked cameras in really anything, so again, this is great news, but honestly, the musical instruments are just an annoyance to me, especially in Nuclear Winter's loading screen, whatever you want to call it. It really grinds my gears. Anyways, moving on, improved map marker ordering and selection to help address how icons are highlighted when several markers overlap each other on the map. For the Purveyor, weapon and armor model previews now appear in the Purveyor's trade menu when browsing item categories. And for settings, an enable power armor HUD option has been added to the display settings, which can be toggled to decide whether to display the power armor HUD or the standard HUD while wearing power armor. Disabling the setting will cause the Quick Boy menu to display when viewing the Pip-Boy. And oh my god, this is by far the biggest thing in this update. I dread the power armor HUD that was introduced with Fallout 4 and is still in Fallout 76. I prefer the normal HUD, as the power armor HUD is just, it's disgusting and it takes up way too much of your screen, and it just makes visibility absolutely ass, especially for Nuclear Winter mode. And it just makes the enjoyment of wearing power armor absolutely diminished. And it's more of just an annoyance to wear power armor. However, with this update, I'm going to be wearing power armor all the time, because now I won't be annoyed while wearing power armor. So I want to know your thoughts on that. Do you think that this is the biggest part of the update? I know we haven't even continued going through it all, but that is such an amazing update. I wish they would go back and add this as an option in Fallout 4. I know they won't, but damn, do I ever wish they would. Moving on to gameplay improvements for new players. We've made a number of changes to the early game to help dwellers who are just stepping out of Vault 76 better adapt to life in the Wasteland. And I really appreciate them going to the new players and making their experience better, because early game is the most important part of this section of the game to keep people engaged and keep players active in the game moving forward. You don't want your game to suck in the beginning and get better at the end, so they can add all the amazing end content that they want, but if they don't have good beginning content and don't make the game accessible to new players, they're not going to continue playing it, especially years down the road. So I'm glad that they're focusing on this. But anyways, let's go ahead and read through it. Camp deployments. Redeploying a camp shortly after a deployment no longer incurs a CAPS penalty. For challenges, the rewards for many early game challenges have been reworked and now award items that will help a new player survive, such as aid, weapons, armor, and etc., instead of atoms. I do appreciate that they're adding stuff that will help players early on, but I don't know how I feel them removing the atoms that you earn earlier on in the game. A lot of people, as a defense for the kind of pay to win repair kits in Fallout 76 use the fact that atoms are so easy to achieve, especially in the early game, as an excuse for, hey, you can just earn the atoms and buy the repair kits that way. Well, if they keep on removing ways to earn atoms, especially in the early stages, well, then that will no longer be the case. So I like this, but I don't like it at the same time. I kind of wish it would do both at the same time, but that's just my opinion. Moving on, diseases. Players must now be level 15 or higher to receive a disease. I actually like this change, as diseases can be quite annoying in the game and can really screw you over early on in the game. And it's kind of hard early game to actually access disease cures and everything else in the game that get rid of your diseases. You have to keep in mind, players around level 15 don't have access to even White Spring yet, so I really like this change. As for enemies, some enemy difficulties have been adjusted. Ash Heap. The level range for creature spawns has been reduced from 15 to 35 to 15 to 20 in the following locations: Belching Betty, Ash Forge, and the Rusty Pick. For the Savage Divide, the level range for creature spawns has been reduced from 15 to 99 to 15 to 25 in the following locations: Top of the World, Pleasant Valley Ski Resort, Pleasant Valley Cabins, Pleasant Valley Train Station, NAR Regional, 𝗦𝗢𝗖𝗜𝗦𝗏, Cliff Watch, South Cutthroat Camp, and Beckwith Farm. As for Toxic Valley, the level range for creature spawns has been reduced from 10 to 25 to 10 to 15 in the following locations: Cobbleton Farm, Becker Farm, Grafton, Clarksburg, Eastern Regional Pen, and Smith Farm. Now, I do want to say, for all of these changes, I wish it was just a change for lower players. What it seems like they're saying here is that even for these locations for high level players, you'll no longer be able to access enemies that are higher level. So, for example, in Top of the World, Pleasant Valley Ski Resort, Pleasant Valley Cabins, Pleasant Valley Train Station, NAR Regional, 𝗦𝗢𝗖𝗜𝗏𝗏, Cliff Watch, South Cutthroat Camp, and Beckwith, you'll no longer be able to see enemies that are up to level 99, which a lot of people use locations like this, and they go to locations like this in order to get XP, but also to kill legendary enemies. So the fact that they're decreasing that all the way down to 25, I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe it doesn't affect higher level players, but the way that they're wording this, it does seem like that is the case. It seems like it's just affecting these locations overall, as if I remember correctly, that is how it works. I've been over level 100 for so long that I honestly can't recall. I'm kind of mixed on this change. I'm glad that they're making more areas accessible to newer players, but I wish for higher level players there was some sort of scale for them. I feel like that's a lot more complicated to introduce into the game, especially if they don't have the systems in place, but that would be my preference. I'm not a game developer, so here I am. Moving on to events, Fertile Soil now triggers in a smaller area and is confined to the Vault-Tec Agricultural Research Center. For fast travel, cap costs when fast traveling have been reduced for players under level 25. Holotapes, government supply requisition holotapes will no longer spawn in Flatwoods and cannot be looted by players who have not yet reached level 10 or higher. Don't really like this change, but whatever. For random encounters, they removed a random encounter that could cause a large group of level 5 Protectrons to spawn for low-level players on the road to Flatwoods. Now moving on to Nuclear Winter balance, starting with perks. Frog Legs. Jumping in rapid succession now temporarily reduces maximum jump height and requires a short rest to recuperate. This is a very needed change, as Frog Legs was by far one of the most powerful perks in Nuclear Winter because you could just spam jump over and over again. And boy, in Fallout 76, is it ever hard to hit not only a moving target, but someone that is jumping at extreme heights and at extreme speeds. So thank you, Bethesda, for fixing Frog Legs. I can finally jump back into Nuclear Winter. For Master perk cards, select Master perk cards have received bonus damage reductions. So Commando Master, Heavy Gunner Master, Guerrilla Master, Rifleman Master, Shotgun Master, and Demolition Expert. As a dev note, in general, these perk cards were too powerful and began to feel more like required picks than options, so we've balanced them out to better reflect their cost value. Moving on to weapon balancing. For explosive weapons, they have greatly increased the damage that explosive weapons deal against camp objects and structures. That is good to hear, as honestly, explosion should take out structures, period. The laser auto pistol will no longer fire multiple beams per shot, and then they also reduce the size of the scoped hunting rifle's magazine from 5 to 1. I don't know if they're saying that you have to reload after every single shot. That seems to be what they're saying here. Maybe I'm confused, but according to them, they say this change will help the scoped gunplay of this weapon feel smoother and does not negatively affect its DPS. I don't know. I feel like that is, I honestly don't even know what to say that. We're just gonna move on, because it's a sniper that you have to reload after every shot just sounds like a fucking pain in the ass to me. As for adventure mode and survival mode bug fixes, starting with art and graphics, they fixed several locations where enemies could become stuck. This is a very wide issue. Adjusted a few objects that could clip into the terrain or other environment objects inside of abandoned mineshaft a lane. Adjusted objects in several locations where players could become stuck. Fixed an issue that could cause a player to clip through a table in a garage in Sutton. The security door latch on a shed across the street from 𝗦𝗢𝗣𝗣𝗅𝗧 is no longer floating. Tracer rounds fired by a hunting rifle with the Scorched Killers mod now display the correct visual effects. The art for the cannibal perk no longer flickers when it is not actively being highlighted by the player in the perk menu. iBots in the Arctos Pharma Biome Labs have received updated paint to match other bots in the area. And lastly, replaced a light bulb above one of the bathroom stalls in Watauga High School. Moving on to camp crafting and workshops. Yet again, fix an issue that would cause some floating errors while trying to place a blueprint. Addressed a rare issue that could prevent the player from building in their camp. Camp and workshop blueprints names are now sorted alphabetically in the list. The red enamel variant of the cooking stove now correctly indicates that it is an atomic shop item in the build menu. They addressed an exploit allowing players to place a camp in an unintended area in Charleston. Adjusted several Fasnacht themed camp objects to reduce instances that could result in clipping. Foundations can no longer be placed entirely underground. Fixed several issues related to foundations that could result in errors like part of this structure would be inaccessible. Fix an issue that would sometimes prevent certain keypads from being interactive. Players can now correctly change the lockpicking difficulty of a locked object without needing to first remove the lock. Repeatedly selecting and deselecting objects in the modify menu no longer sometimes causes the player to become stuck editing an object. Radios now play audio immediately after they are powered on. Pioneer scout posters and banners can now be repaired. Fix an issue that would cause wall decor items to appear to float in certain situations. Address an issue that could prevent objects from being placed on walls correctly. Fixed a bug preventing to place a half wall on top of another half wall when it's placed on a foundation. Waving Santa no longer continues to play sound effects after it has been toggled off or becomes unpowered. Fix an issue where resource amounts in the UI would not update after repairing a workshop item outside of build mode. And lastly, fix an issue where resource amounts in the UI would not update after repairing a workshop item outside of build mode. Now moving on to challenges. To earn credit for challenges that require players to kill creatures, like kill different types of tough enemies challenge, they no longer need to land the killing blow. So when a creature is killed, players who dealt enough damage to earn experience will now receive challenge credits, even if another player scores the final hit. So you just have to hit them with a couple of shots and do a decent amount of damage. The rewards displayed after completing the Craft Some Ammo challenge now correctly lists gunpowder. The Metalworker Possum Badge sub-challenge, Visit New River Gorge, has been removed. Fix an issue preventing several Musician Possum Badge sub-challenges from completing correctly when playing various instruments. Removed several Photographer Possum Badge sub-challenges that were difficult to complete. Changed the word collect to acquire in the Collector Possum Badge sub-challenge descriptions. I can't recall, but if these were related to earning atoms, this is again them removing ways to earn atoms. I could be incorrect on that, so I'm not stating it. I'm suggesting it. Now, moving on to enemies. For AI, they implemented improvement to help reduce cases where creatures would become stuck in a non-responsive state, fix an issue that could cause anglers to flee from players it could not reach rather than using its ranged attack. Robo-brains can no longer spawn stuck inside Protectron pods in Atlas Observatory. Legendary sentry bots no longer explode twice on death, and ticks no longer are full of blood of bloodless enemies or structures. I don't know if I'm really fucking stupid right now or if that just literally makes no sense, but moving on. Let's talk about items. Weapons with the Bloody Legendary mod now displayed the correct amount of damage in the Pip-Boy as the player takes or heals damage. This was a visual issue, and the mod's actual damage values have not been changed. Brain bombs now correctly have a condition bar and can spoil like other food items. Address an exploit that could cause a magazine or a bobblehead to become duplicated. Addressed an exploit that could prevent the player from being killed by radiation damage. The shielded barrel mod description now correctly states that it provides superior range when applied. The drum magazine mod for the handmade rifle now correctly increases the handmade rifle's ammo capacity by 50%, which is consistent with drum magazine mods for other weapons. Iguana bits are now required to craft iguana soup rather than squirrel bits. The recipe for dense marine armor torso mod is now properly labeled. Fix an issue that could sometimes cause plasma weapon attacks to pass through a target without dealing damage. The targeting HUD mod for the XO1 power armor will no longer appear as an option in the power armor station menu if the player has not yet learned the required plan. When the Stealth Boy power armor mod's stealth field is active, its effects description in the Pip-Boy effects tab now correctly lists that it drains action points. Broken pieces of armor will now remain equipped when exiting power armor. Repeatedly entering and exiting a set of power armor in a power armor station no longer sometimes causes the player to become stuck in their power armor. Stim packs can no longer be used if the player's health is already full while wearing power armor. Fix an issue that could prevent the player from transferring their camera into their stash for the Pro Snap Deluxe camera. Applying the Responders paint to a pump action shotgun now correctly adds Responders to the weapon's name. Removed 2 piles of scorched ashes from the church in Helvetia that could be consumed but had no other function. Ultrasight laser gun no longer appears to fire plasma projectiles after applying the automatic mod, and oil spills can now be ignited by a wider variety of weapons. Moving on to quests and events. Adjusted enemy spawns when defending the Monaga power plant workshop so that attackers will approach from the outskirts of the workshop. Address several issues that could block Brahmin movement during the free range events. For Line in the Sand, Scorch no longer begin attacking Algeni Asylum before the event begins. Adjusted a Scorch Beast spawn location during the event, and Scorch that are spawned during the event now more reliably receive quest objective markers. For Possum Jr. Roboticist Tour, logging out before visiting the first tour stop no longer causes voice-over lines to replay when logging back in. For Project Paradise, fix an issue causing enemies to spawn continuously during the Project Paradise events. Fix an issue that could cause moist rad kelp to persist indefinitely in the player's inventory after completing rad kelp in Habitat C objective. For safe work, they removed a copy of the Patrol 4 Medical Center holotape that did not work correctly. For the Order of the Tadpole, fix an issue that could prevent the player from restarting or completing the Listen to Scout Leader Jaggy objective correctly if they died while Scout Leader Jaggy was speaking. And lastly, for Unsolved Picnic Panic, removed an extra copy of Mary's diary page and addressed issues that could result in lost quest progress or duplicate quest items. For performance instability, attempting to report a player while loading into a world no longer sometimes causes an infinite load screen. Reduce the time it takes to return to the main menu after leaving a world, and addressed a performance issue relating to quest items. For perks, the effects of Pain Tray no longer hit NPCs or creatures who are not hostile to the player. Moving on to sound, attempting to interact with an enemy frog jar in the player's inventory no longer cause frog sound effects to play. Fix an issue in all game modes that could cause gunfire sound effects to loop endlessly. This has been a problem since launch, and oh my god, thank you, Bethesda. If you actually fix this entirely, I love you. This is not better than the Power Armor HUD updates, but boy, I experienced this so many times. This was actually one of the bugs that I always experienced. So moving on, reduce the volume of legendary exchange machine sound effects. Voiceover processing has been added to the swimming instructor's line that plays when the player attempts to test without a swimsuit. Voiceover processing has been added to the scout leader Jaggy's first line of dialogue. The rolling pin, bone club, and ski sword now play sound effects that more closely match their weapon types when striking enemies. And tinkers and brewing workbenches no longer play sound effects endlessly if the workbench owner leaves the world while it's being used by another player. Moving on to user interface. Fix typos across several areas of the game. The Atomic Shop's top navigation bar no longer remains visible behind the purchase confirmation screen when purchasing items. On Xbox, the left-handed category list no longer displays incorrectly after scrolling to the bottom of the list and then back up. Fix an issue where the need items prompt in the Atomic Shop could remain visible when trying to back out of the prompt. Address an issue preventing skid color from applying to a character's face in the change appearance menu. Using the quick swap button now more consistently switches to an alternate weapon and no longer swaps to a broken or unusable weapon. Damage indicators now appear on screen when hit by a missile launcher, plasma gun, or other weapon projectiles. Hit markers will now correctly appear when damaging destructible objects, such as Strangler Hearts or during Heart of the Enemy daily quests. On Xbox, resetting the controls to default settings and then joining a survival mode world no longer sometimes prevents the player from accessing containers or workbenches. Fix an issue that could cause the controls to become unresponsive when interacting with a power armor station while sprinting with a ranged weapon equipped. The objective to retrieve your dropped loot that appears on death now only completes once all drop loot has been taken. Condition bars are no longer displayed on items that have been assigned to a vending machine when viewing the item list from a fermenter. Attempting to assign a fully fermented drink to the fermenter no longer causes a camp budget related error message to display. Removed a series of dashes that could appear in the top left corner of the screen when playing in 16:10 resolutions. Weapons that have alternate appearances from their base models, such as Enclave and Ultrasight weapons, now display correctly in the inspect menu. The word free is no longer truncated on free items in the Atomic Shop when running the game client in languages other than English. Adjusted wanted icons so they are less likely to prevent interactions with nearby map markers. A large nuke zone indicator will no longer appear over a normal nuke zone indicator on the map after switching to adventure mode from Nuclear Winter. Pacifist mode no longer appears enabled for characters below level 5 in adventure mode after playing a Nuclear Winter match. Fix an issue that could prevent currently available daily quests from appearing under the BIV entry in the personal terminal. Junk item component counts no longer display 0 in the Pip-Boy component menu after joining a world. Players can now correctly respawn at their camps when they are over-encumbered. Ammo and other items are no longer sometimes split into multiple entries in the rewards list that appears after completing a quest or event. When choosing scrap all at a workbench, the component list is now sorted alphabetically. Fix an issue that prevented the sort by spoil option from working correctly in container, vendors, and trade menus. Additionally, the sort by spoil option now replaces the lowest condition items at the top of the list, so it's easier to find items that are nearly expired. The requested label now correctly displays in the trade menu. The brewing station tutorial no longer reappears after disconnecting and logging back in. If a player buys the same type of item multiple times from another player's vending machine, like stacks of 308 ammo, the seller will now correctly receive separate notifications displaying the amount sold each time, rather than the total amount sold across all of those transactions. When using a vending machine, the items assigned to that machine now correctly sort to the top of the list. Fix an issue that could prevent players from scrolling through their inventory to mark additional items for sale in the vending machine. Fix an issue where vending machine information is incorrectly cleared when the character is loaded. Fix an issue where sometimes players would remain in the player vending menu if the camp was moved or the vending machine was scrapped or stored. Moving on to Nuclear Winter bug fixes. Starting with art and graphics, smoke visual effects in the storm no longer move in the wrong direction the first time the play area constricts. Fix an issue that could prevent nuclear blast visual effects from appearing in third-person view. Clouds in the storm no longer occasionally change colors or flicker, and grass now visually burns after the storm passes over the player. For camp, When placed in players' camps, lamps can no longer be activated during nuclear winter matches. Hero of the Wasteland statues in players' camps can no longer be activated during nuclear winter matches. And turrets can now correctly deal damage to enemy structures that were built using a quick kit. For environments, players can now walk through duffel bags dropped by other players on death, and adjusted objects in a location in New River Gorge where players could become stuck. For items, automatic laser rifles now correctly benefit from commando perks rather than rifleman perks. Players will now drop a duffel bag if disconnected, address an exploit affecting an issue of 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗥𝗧 magazine. The Shredder mod can no longer be used to damage or kill other characters during nuclear winter matches. Adjusted a power armor spawn location at New River Gorge Resort to prevent a potential animation issue. Players no longer sometimes appear to slide or float when entering power armor. Address an issue that could cause certain power armor paints to be replaced by the War Rider paint during nuclear winter matches, and fix an issue that could cause a scoped Western revolver to incorrectly spawn as an unmodded Western revolver. I need some water in me. Moving on to performance and stability. Fix an issue that could cause some players to become logged out after every nuclear winter match. Address an issue that could cause players to become disconnected during nuclear winter matches when building in their camps, and implemented an improvement affecting memory usage. For perks, Bullet Shield no longer displays its bonus resistance notification every time the player fires a heavy weapon in nuclear winter. They fix an issue causing Ground Pounder to not work with automatic combat rifles. Grenades dropped when a player with Last Laugh is downed can no longer damage the player that dropped them. I was always questioning whether this was a thing when my buddy was telling me that he got this perk. I was just thinking, won't that kind of kill yourself? But now they fixed that, so apparently it was a thing. Lock Detector has now been renamed to Hack Detector to reduce confusion about this perk card's functionality. For sound, the volume of impact sound effects has been reduced for punches thrown by candidates inside Vault 51. It can get pretty loud in Vault 51 if you haven't experienced it. For user interface, address an exploit related to reviving another player. Fix an issue that caused 3-digit overseer ranks to display incorrectly in Chinese and Korean. Fix an issue in Chinese versions that would cause the Storm's movement timer to display incorrectly while in spectator mode. Team placement text no longer flickers when opening and closing the spectator menu on the match summary screen. Upcoming rewards are no longer missing icons on the match summary screen. Enemy nameplates and health no longer appear to players who have damaged them within the last 5 seconds. Teammate nameplates will no longer follow players when they are spectating. Fix an issue that could cause a revive attempt to fail even though it appeared successful. Fix a rare issue where players could be revived with incorrect amounts of health. The select deployment location button will no longer display after the spawn countdown timer concludes. On PS4, disconnecting and reconnecting while queuing for a nuclear winter match no longer causes issues with sign-in or social menu functionality. The sort by spoil option no longer incorrectly appears, and 8 items can now only be sorted by weight, and terminals can no longer be activated in the same moment that the select deployment location screen appears. And that is everything for Fallout 76 patch 11, July 16th, 2019. I hope you guys enjoyed, found it informative. If you did, please smack that like button down below, subscribe, join the good fight if you haven't already, and ring that bell icon to stay updated in all of my future videos. It'd be super greatly appreciated as always. And until next time, this is Apoqsi signing off.